Hello everyone out there. This is a very informal video that is partly being done because I need to keep track of what I'm doing and also to show you a couple of interesting things while I'm doing it. This camera has been sitting in the set for quite a while now, and it's one of my very favorite cameras. It is the Olympus Pen EES2. Now there's a number of different versions of this camera, but this here is the EES2. I'm going to get you a little closer so you can get an overview of the camera before we get too excited here. Now, I don't know how well you can tell this because it's in my hands, but this is an unusually small camera. Actually, one second. For a size comparison, this is a typical point-and-shoot camera from the 80s, that Ricoh FF3AF Super, and this is the Olympus Pen, so it's quite a bit more compact. Although obviously it's got the big lens bump there, but its compactness was part of its selling point, but the other interesting thing about it is this is a half frame camera. So if I open the back, the actual area that is exposed to the film is half the size of a normal camera. So this shouldn't have film in it, I don't think. Yeah. So it's literally exactly cut in half. And that's what makes the camera smaller, but it also just makes it more economical on film. And as it happens, the half frame is the same size frame as motion picture camera. So the Olympus Pen takes the same physical image as a movie camera. It's pretty neat. Now this camera is also very clever in the way that it is, the way it works. It's a fully automatic camera from way long ago, and it doesn't take batteries, yet it has automatic light metering. So under the lens cap, you'll notice the inside part is the actual lens, but there's this weird honeycomb stuff all around here. This is a selenium light cell. I kind of want to call it a solar panel, but that's not technically correct. But on the aperture ring, you'll notice there's a position that says auto. Hopefully you can read that in the camera. I think you should be able to. And then you have your different aperture settings. Now, on auto, this is what's so neat about the camera. If you can see, you should be able to. You can see the aperture opening in the lens. Notice how much it's opening. It's opening that far. Now I'm going to change the film speed setting on the camera down to 100. It's opening farther. If I keep going down to whatever it is now, the aperture has opened even more. If I go the other direction to the fastest speed, see it hasn't opened much at all. There's a system inside this camera that it's fully analog. The first version of this camera, the original Pen EE, came out in 1961. And basically, depending on the voltage produced by this cell when it's exposed to light, there's a little needle that's moving up and down inside the camera, and it is trapping. It's called trap needle metering, and there's a little mechanism that grabs that needle and sets the aperture. And so just by pointing this at a scene, it will automatically set the correct aperture. And changing the film speed, what this is doing is actually covering up parts of the cell. So the slowest speed this camera will shoot at is 25, and barely any of the sensor is exposed right now. But as we move up all the way to 400, more and more of it gets exposed. Now this camera is fully functional. If I wind it, it's working perfectly, except I broke it. I don't know how exactly this happened, but I had it in a camera bag, and I think, in fact I know, I'm pretty sure I shot some pictures with it in this state. It's perfectly functional, but the detents are missing. The actual focus ring, because there's a focus ring on the EES models, they have a 2.8 aperture, and so they actually have a focus ring. It's not a fixed focus lens. But the detents are missing from the focus ring, as well as the ASA ring. The same thing as ISO, but back then this is the ASA speed. So the camera works, but it's the fact that this won't stay put, like this is way too easy to move, and also the ASA won't stay put as well. So there has been film in this camera for years because I didn't remember what's in it, and I have been afraid to shoot it. I finally took it out. It was the Super Lucky 200, and it had something like, I don't know, a dozen frames shot on it. So I took it out of the camera. I'm going to eventually develop that roll of film and put it back in another camera. But what I want to do today is, there's magic. There's magic. 2 and 3. I bought 2 parts cameras on eBay to fix this camera. This is a lost cause. This thing, the shutter won't fire. It is in horrible shape. It's completely bent. This is the one that I'm going to focus on right now because I want to take it apart and see what is creating the detents, because that is still intact. This is still clicky. That is still clicky too. This camera though, I might be able to fix. When I got this camera, I actually ended up not paying for it because the seller listed it as working and the aperture system was not working. It's a very common thing on these cameras. So I reached out to that seller and I was like, hey, this camera's not working. Can we come to some sort of an agreement? And like, you know, he took his time, or she, I don't know if it was a man or woman, but they took their time getting back to me, and took so long that eBay just made them refund the whole purchase. So this was a free camera that I fixed, and I might be able to do the same fix to this camera. And this one is also in really good cosmetic shape, and I like that it's got the gray leatherette and not the black. So this one, not touching right now. But this one, like I said, it's gnarly, it's completely gross. It's like got some rust in here. You can't, it's completely bound up. It won't fire the shutter. It won't advance forward. So this I'm fine to just take apart, and it's going to be a parts camera and nothing else. So I have a precision screwdriver, and there's guides on how to do this, but I'm not bothering to look them up because, again, this is a parts camera and none of the guides have ever talked about what happens when the detents just fail. There is a situation, something called wobbly lens. People talk about a wobbly lens. I don't think that's what's wrong with my camera because the actual center part, the lens, is rock solid. It's just the rings and the light meter portion. In fact, the aperture ring is rock solid as well. It's literally just the 2 intermediary parts that are wobbly. So I want to take it off of this camera, figure out how it's put together, and see if there's a part that I can put in there and ta-da, fixed camera. But the other reason why this is a little nerve-wracking is because the lens unscrews, and you need to be very careful of marking where it was, because if you put it back on incorrectly, everything will be out of focus. And I did that very thing. When I first fixed this camera, I shot a roll of film which was entirely unusable. Nothing was in focus. So I managed to fix it, luckily, and now that, back then, geez, I've had this for so long, I've had this for more than 10 years. I don't know why I must not have been bulk rolling my own film, because what I'm going to do now is put just a little bit of film in a cartridge, shoot a few frames and develop it, to make sure it's in focus if I need to disassemble it to that degree. But for now, we're gonna try to get this apart. There's 3 screws. Can't tell if I'm actually making any progress. There's 3 screws around this ring, and then this just pops off. This camera is in just terrible, terrible shape. So for all I know, these screws could just be completely rusted and disintegrated beyond recognition. These are just flathead screws, aren't they? I did this before. Yeah, they are. It's coming off. Not how it's supposed to. This screw... Okay. That should not have been like that. And this, again, I don't care about this camera, but this is the critical part for focus. If I do this on that camera, I need to very carefully remove that. But I'm going to have to do that. I can tell. So... I do not have the appropriate JIS. At least I don't think so. Drivers, which I know I should. This is a Japanese camera. Alas, I don't. So I'm going to try my best with Philips Zero. Apparently those are not the important screws because nothing came out. That feels... That did something. Can you see? Well, barely. It's in frame. I'm going to be a lot carefuler with the other one, but you know, I don't remember it being this stubborn. So, okay. I mean, I know there's wires attached to this, but why are you... What the heck? Is this just this horribly awful camera? I don't remember needing to take these out, but maybe I had to, so we'll try. I know that, like, depending on what you need to do, you might have to take this completely to bits. I would rather not. And I know I didn't go that far with the old camera. It wasn't that big of a deal, so I very much regret breaking it in the way that I broke it. Okay, what's happening? Come off. Okay, okay. I shouldn't have taken those screws out, I don't think. That was a bad move. Hey, but this will spin now. That's a plus. I mean, it's not cocking the shutter, so it's not like we really saved anything there, but... So how does the top come off the camera? I'm about ready to just cut this dang wire, but I don't want to do that. Oh, but man, this lens is dirty inside of this. This is such a lost cause, this particular example. You can't see what I'm doing, I'm sorry. The film rewinder, well, okay, fine. But yes, absolutely, for sure. There's corrosion in here. This thing is not doing hot. Someone's been in here before. This has been robbed of parts. I was beginning to suspect, but there's a screw that should be there. It's not there. Naughty, naughty. Person who sold this to me. I've had these for quite a while, by the way. This isn't something that just got shipped, so. Looks like it got for parts or repaired multiple times in its life. But anyway, once you get these screws out, the whole mechanism should just come free. Or so I've been told. Okay. Ah! Okay, I'm pulling off the wire from the hot shoe, okay? It's gone. The hot shoe, incidentally, is what makes this an EES-2, as the EES model did not have the hot shoe. It just had the flash sync. Well, now it's on here somewhere. This thing. That socket, whatever it's called. So, and we can see this one, the selenium cell on this is not dead. Let me show you. I need to get closer to you, I think. So if nothing else, I've got a good selenium cell. Can you see? Right by the viewfinder, there's a little needle. See that moving? I'm just pointing this towards and away from the light. No batteries required, yet automatic metering. Pretty neat stuff. So when I talk about this camera, I'll be keeping this handy to demonstrate this. But now what broke on the lens assembly here? Because you know what's interesting is now that it's not attached to the camera, there's no detents at all. Well, ain't that a mystery? Oh. What? Where'd the shutter? There's a shutter thing that moves. Okay, this is still very clicky. Okay, I can see now. There is a ball bearing. Oh, you... Ha! Sorry. There's a ball bearing right under here. And that's what's making the clicking for the film speed. But the focus ring, well, that's clicking too. Well, what might be simplest to do is to swap this over, but this doesn't, I don't like how gross this is. The other thing is that requires then making a repair, doesn't it? I'll have to break apart the wire. Forgot about that. I have to think about this, because it definitely seems like Oh, there's the slider thingy. So that has to go in. So that's very simple. There's just a pin. There is a sliding shutter under here which is exposing more or less of the light cell. And so that lines up with the pin inside here. Just like that, I think. So this is really perplexing. I don't know. Put this back. So for sure I gotta take the lens off of this one no matter what. And I guess what I can try to do is because it really looks like this isn't going to be repairable, except to maybe take... This just looks so gross. That's my biggest issue. Let me see what comes apart here. Well, anyway, I'm gonna stop recording for a while and play around with this, because this has quickly turned to less interesting, I think. But I might just be swapping parts over from this one to the other camera, but it's looking like it has to be this entire assembly. I don't know what could have popped on the other one, unless like these screws are loose. That was fun. Yeah, well, doing that kind of makes it feel like... And actually, you know, if I push in on this, those clicks come back. So it'd be funny if those screws are loose. Or it could be that this retaining, whatever they're grabbing onto, just completely gave out. Wow, I have a feeling of deja vu right now. I've done this exact thing before. Pretty sure I haven't. But anyway, bye. Okay, I'm dumbfounded. Those 3 screws are all loose. This is the good camera. So, presumably, if I just tighten them... Are you kidding me? How did this happen? How on earth did this happen? They're all... I thought something would have popped. This is like the silliest... Okay, so I gotta figure out how to... Something got... I want to put this back, the aperture doodad. But my challenge is I don't know what do you hook into? Okay, what's happening here? You should stop, right? Now I gotta get the... Yeah, you shouldn't be able to keep going. What are you not... Something's very wrong here. The aperture ring... I gotta figure out what it engages with. Oh, okay, I see. It's way simpler than I thought. I'm panicking over nothing. There's a, this piece here, this brass piece here is just pushing in on this pin, I think. because this is the actual aperture. Yep, that's the actual aperture right there. And actually, while I'm in here, I noticed this was starting to get a little sticky again. What did I use to unstick that? Did I use oil? Well, anyway, so I'm just going to put this back together. I didn't have to get any parts from the other one, but I'm glad I took it apart first. This is just dumb. These screws backed out. The little retaining screws under here, they backed out, and so that's why the detents were all gone. It's just baffling that that would happen. I also see there's the wire is frayed right here. It's the insulation is missing. So I will remedy that somehow. Or maybe not, because it's against plastic. I don't know. That's going to be really hard to like put a piece of electrical tape around or something. Anyway, I know what the problem was. Yay, thanks for sort of following along with this repair. And now I know the lens, I totally screwed this up because it's basically exactly a quarter turn back from fully inserted. So I have markings that need to go top and bottom. And then I'll just shoot a test roll. But yeah, this is nowhere near as broken as I thought it was going to be. This is literally honestly hardly broken at all. So how's that for strange, huh? Anyway, toodles. Okay, I wanted to show you the actual light metering mechanism because at this angle you can see it. So the needle, I'm going to put an arrow on it so you can identify where it is. That's the needle. And as I cover the light sensor, you'll see that it moves. Right, so however much voltage is produced by the light landing on this cell, that's how much the needle moves. Now when you push the shutter button in, you see this little doohickey comes up and squeezes the needle so it can't move. Just like that. That's the trap needle part of this metering system. And then this two-stepped doodad here comes up and gets stopped by the needle. And that determines how wide the aperture will be opened before the shutter is released. And the reason why there are two steps, you can see there's teeth carved in there, probably just to, well, just to keep the needle from slipping out. Or maybe it's to give discrete aperture values. I'm not sure what the rationale is, but the reason why there's a step there is because this camera has two different shutter speeds. So there is 1/40th of a second that it will use when there's lower light, but if the needle manages to go past that step, the first step, then it will switch to the faster shutter speed. And if there's not enough light at all, and the needle doesn't manage to touch on that point, you get the red flag warning, which on this camera it is not yet working. So this camera, the only thing that's wrong with it, which is the case for so many of these Olympus pens, is the aperture blades are sticky. Because if it can't open the aperture by default is shut like that. So when you actually push the shutter, it opens the aperture. Let me get the one that's back together now so you can see that. Right? Now if it can't open the aperture, the mechanism is completely bound up. And so the aperture blades on this are just sticky. This is it's not too terrible to fix. I'm just using isopropyl alcohol, the same stuff that I was using to light the kerosene lantern. Some people use lighter fluid. Don't know really if one is better than the other. But the tricky thing is, you know, you get it in the blades and you can kind of see that they're wet. They're still a little wet. And so you got to keep working on this. Keep pushing that forward and back until they eventually dry out and you get a nice springy action. Like right here. It's almost exactly what we want. They're not quite dry yet. But now, we're almost there. It's just not quite returning closed. But yeah, these cameras are so simple. The only other thing that can potentially happen is the shutter mechanism itself is gummed up and needs cleaning. And that is more involved because you do need to get the camera apart to this point so you can actually get to the shutter blades. But I don't really know how common of an issue that is, but this one, it's got so much corrosion in here. This is a lost cause, but you can see the needle is still moving, so its selenium cell is still functional. So at least there's that. Oh, I didn't mean to hit record. But okay. Okay, so I'm totally going to have a second working camera once I get the aperture properly cleaned on this one. Now the challenge is how to do that properly. You can't really. I mean, I suppose you can keep disassembling, but I feel like that's kind of risky. So what I've been doing is just going nice and generous with the alcohol around the aperture blades and actuating them a little bit. Now the challenge is they get stiff when they're wet, and then once it gets inside behind the glass there, it takes quite a while to dry because it's kind of trapped. And once you're doing this, I suppose you don't want to let the camera turn over until this is completely dry, because I don't think there's any glass. I don't think there are any lens elements below the aperture blades. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So anyway, yeah, this is by far the most common issue with these cameras. The aperture blades get sticky, and then they don't. There's kind of a fine balance because it has to be able to open the thing. So the key thing that stops working is you don't get the red flag warning that there's not enough light. It needs to be able to open the aperture completely in order to throw up that red flag. So if the aperture is bound up, you won't get that red flag warning, and it will keep taking pictures. The red flag is actually a shutter interlock, so if there isn't enough light and you have it set to automatic, it should not let you take a picture. But if the aperture is stuck closed, it will, because it physically needs to be able to open the aperture in order for that red flag warning to happen. So it's just a design. I don't even know if you can call it a flaw, because it took many years for the aperture blades to get gummed up, but most of these now, this camera is probably 50 years old or more. I don't know exactly, although it has this one's probably newer than the other one. There's a pink, I think you can just barely see it, there's a pink wire guard, so the wires are run a little more cleanly in this for the light sensor and the flash jack there. But yeah, so I mean, once the aperture blades are dry and clean, this is going to be a functional camera, which I paid maybe $20 for, parts not working. Pretty neat. And all I will need to do is put the lens back, and now I'm remembering the issue. You can start the threading in one of two ways. So if you make a mark, but you don't actually test going all the way in, you can find out that your mark is on the wrong side. So the first time I put the other camera back together, this was a half turn out too far, and you only turn this about, what, is it even a quarter of a turn? Not even. If you can see on this camera here, it's a little out of focus, but that's the far focus, and that's the closest distance. So if you have it out a half turn, it's wildly out of focus, which was exactly what happened. So you need to actually bottom it out and then back it up to make sure that the mark you made is actually somewhat correct. What I don't like about this design is it is literally loosening the lens to focus, and then the thing that I was struggling with, the tiny screws, this ring here, those set screws just clamp this ring to the lens, and then there's a little finger that goes into the focus ring around the lens. I don't really like how that's set up, and those set screws, like, they're just taking this apart again. They're very damaged. So, but I mean, it's so clever. I know this is not the only camera to use this style of metering, but it's still just fantastically clever how it's like, doesn't take batteries, doesn't need anything at all, and yet it's a fully automatic camera. It doesn't have automatic focus, of course, but this is actually the EES models, so the EES and the EES2, they have that wider aperture, so they have a focus ring, but the Pen EE and the EE2 is a f3.5, I think, and it's a fixed focus lens. And I might have one coming to test it. Mainly I'm just curious to find out if it's worth dealing with the focus ring on these for general photography, because these do produce very sharp negatives if they're correctly focusing. But the EE, by the way, stands for electronic eye. But yeah, I mean, these cameras are plentiful. If I'm going to have some sort of Techmoan effect and cause the price to go way up once I talk about this camera, now is when you might want to start looking at getting one. There's a ton of them in Japan, which isn't really shocking considering who made them, but there's also a lot in the US. It's just unfortunate because most people don't have much of an idea of how they work, so rarely are they tested, and if they don't know about the red flag thing, they might not know if it's working or not. So most of them that you find for sale, they'll say for parts are not working, but as you can see, it's quite frequently not a big issue to fix. If you have an issue with the shutter, if it's binding up, that might be more complicated, but I mean, I got this one to bits without too much difficulty. So it's just a matter of being careful and putting it back together. But yeah, thanks for following along. I probably heavily edited the section where I was disassembling the trash one because, ugh, but this is already back together. Those screws just came loose. That's the only problem. They got it's clicky again. So I'm going to wind a test roll. I do have film in my bulk load. Actually, let me show you that because you didn't see that. I have this loaded up with Fomapan again. So now there's actually a little bit of film sticking out of here. So as I showed in the video, you put an empty cassette, you tape the film to the middle of it, close it up, and turn the crank. So what I'll do for both of these cameras is a very small roll with the smallest number of exposures it shows is 10. So I might even do just like 7 turns on this. I just want a few shots for test focus, but maybe I'll do 10. And develop that and see if the lens is on correctly. And if it is, yay, now I have 2 working Olympus Pen EES2s and in 2 different colors. How handy. I could put black and white film in this one and color film in the other one. Planning.